guys? Welcome to another episode of Turbo Chatter. Remember, times may be low, but the boost is always high. Today we have another super rad guest with us, my buddy Tim, Turbo Timmy. So, Tim, why don't you go ahead and give us a little intro about yourself, man?
How you doing? My name is Tim Moceri. I'm I guess a welder fabricator for about 15 years, 20 years now, off and on. Super professionally, as far as like doing it for a living, would be probably within the last like 12 years. But if it's made out of metal, I pretty much, that's what I work with on a daily basis.
That's awesome, man. It's like the ultimate kind of sandbox for car guys, right? You get to go in and build
Yeah,
and create whatever you have in your vision and brain.
yeah, for
I love
sure. I mean, welding and fabrication for me has been like probably one of the most rewarding things in my life. As far as being able to work with my hands, that's pretty much the ideal situation as far as how I'm wired. I can't be in an office in front of a computer all day. So
I hear that, brother. I've never once in my life worn a tie or sat at a desk to do any
yeah,
kind of work. So I'm 100% on board with your vision and ethos for sure.
yeah, yeah.
So tell me, man, were you guys car guys in your family growing up? Was it something that kind of you came into naturally to love being around cars and sort of being a collector and enthusiast, or did that come later on?
Yeah, I pretty much my earliest memories as a child is being at the racetrack with my dad at the drag strip. I grew up in a Mopar family, believe it or not, with all my uncles drove Cudas, and my dad had a '69 Plymouth Belvedere with a 440 big block with a 4-speed on the floor. And I have pictures of me when I was like probably 6 years old, sitting in the engine bay of my uncle's Cuda, acting like I was doing something to the carburetor. And yeah, I mean, it's been cars since I could walk, really.
That's awesome, man. So basically, your family was Mopar or no car kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, they couldn't stand Chevys. I heard all the talk about that, and believe it or not, the Mopar thing never really sank in with me personally. Like I mean, it never really. Even to this day, I see a Dodge or whatever. I mean, if I see an old GNX or a Cuda, it'll kind of raise my eyebrow. But um, at heart, I'm not really a Mopar guy. But I was raised in a Mopar house.
All right, so my Mopar interest in bloodline stops pretty much at Cummins, which is my daily, my Ram 2500 Cummins. So I've got a little bit of Mopar in me, but maybe not to the extent of your dad and your uncle.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So then if that's the case, man, and you're not really super sold on Mopar now as a big boy, what was the first car you remember that really kind of set it off for you? I know you mentioned you went to the drag strip, but was there a car? I'm looking at the poster, particularly in the background of your screenshot now. You want to tell us a little? Because I know, you and I are buddies, so I know what cars that you really dig. But tell us, man, because we want to hear about it.
Yeah, so I grew up in a household. I grew up in a family like with cars, obviously. So that was in the blood. But I think it didn't really get my juices flowing until I saw a couple cars on the big screen. Like I've always been big into movies, and what kid isn't? And growing up in the '80s, there wasn't anything bigger than Back to the Future as far as I was concerned. So the first time I saw the DeLorean rolling out the back of Doc Brown's box truck with the smoke coming out of it, like, and of course it wasn't the sound of the car; it was a V8 they took from another car. But in the movie, it sounds like that's it, and it starts up and it pulls out, and it was it. I was done, and I've been addicted to cars ever since. But the DeLorean, as bad as it is, it's a piece of junk. I know the car is total junk. But like that was the car that really got me like addicted to. And then from there on, I'd spend hours and hours, looking through magazines and looking at all these cars, and that kind of just started. And it's always been a car in the back of my mind that I'll own someday. But as of right now, I'd say my roots are in the JDM world. I'm really, really into the Japanese cars.
Well, you know, that's a big reason why you and I vibe for sure. We have a
Yeah.
common love of all the Japanese rocket ships. But we're going to come back to the DeLorean later because I think for one of my ending questions, it's probably going to resurface. But you did mention that you spent a lot of time at the drag strip with your family, right? So did you do any driving or racing yourself, or were you kind of just there to check out your uncles and dad?
Yeah. So I used to go for, rides in the passenger seat with dad, but it wasn't until I was like 16, 17 when I got myself I actually got a red IROC Z Camaro.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes, dude.
my buddy had a '89 CRX SI, and when I was like 16, 17 years old, the Hondas were like on top of the world. That was back when like import drag racing was huge. If you weren't driving a Civic Si or an Integra,
DA
or
Integra, baby. Yeah.
yeah, if you weren't driving something out of the pages of Super Street or Import Tuner, you just didn't exist. So they all deemed it the redneck rocket. So I used to take it to the drag show a couple times, and drag racing just never really resonated with me. I had fun when I tried it a couple times, but after I did it maybe 5 or 6 times, it was pretty much over. And believe it or not, I the peer pressure got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore. So I blew up the Camaro and I went and I bought a '98 Civic hatchback.
Ah, yes, the gumdrop. One of my
I had
favorite Hondas, man.
a '98, yeah, I had a black one with all these dreams of doing, all the B series swaps and all that stuff, and just never got around to it.
It's funny you say that, man, because for a long time, I don't know if I've ever told you, but one of the first cars that I ever saw that really kind of got my front tail wagging as a young man was a first gen 3000 GT.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the point more is when I was in high school, kind of the age you were just talking about, one of my dream aspirations as a young car buck was to do an an EM1 SI, and flamenco black pearl, with
Yeah.
time. I can't even remember what the cool brand of wheels was back then, but super corny now. But,
Yeah.
down the list, I'd sit in class and you're hearing about geometry and other crap, and I'd be writing down parts list, AEM cold air intake, DC sports headers, Tanabe medallion exhaust, the whole
Oh
nine.
yeah, man. I must have had probably if like I physically still had them, I would have 100 build folders. I'd sit there and I'd waste my parents' ink and paper, and I'd print out all the parts, and I'd itemize everything and build the car in a fold. I mean, that's what we did back before you had video games where you can kind of just build the car virtually and drive it and everything on Xbox or whatever. But yeah, I used to make so many build sheets and build logs.
100%, man. I can't tell you how many detentions I got for doing Type R logos and Honda logos and doing the front end of Civics with giant front mount intercoolers in all my different classes in high school.
Yeah. That was like late '90s, early 2000s. Mainly, I'd say mid to late '90s. That was probably Hondas were the big thing. That was tough to try to drive anything else at that period of time.
I have some homies out west who they were super dialed in with the Rev Hard guys when that was still like a big name in Honda turbo kits. And this dude Tom, who ran this site called Camp 1320, which sold all like the hottest JDM Honda parts. Those dudes were also very responsible for my love of Hondas at the time, because one of them had an EK coupe and the other had an EG coupe, and they were both B-Series swapped with turbos, and they would just bust up on supercar and exotic cars in the San Fernando Valley. And of course, tell the tales of how they embarrassed these dudes on our, what the hell was the name of that forum? Super Honda or something like that. But anyway, those are some of my oldest, closest, lifelong friends now, believe it or not, which is really funny.
Yeah, well, the Honda thing ended within 2 seconds in '99 when I discovered drifting in 240 SXs. It was
yes.
it was over. It was over for me.
Well, let me ask you, man, because in that space too, we are speaking with you because I want to hear about your talents and your expertise as a fabricator. So,
Yeah.
when did you exactly pick up your first welder? I mean, how did that come to be? Because you told me you spent a lot of time around cars, you went to the track. So, obviously, it was big in your family to turn wrenches and modify stuff. But how did you get interested in welding and how did that get to be?
Well, when I was introduced to drifting, I was still driving the Civic, and I was like, this mindset of just bolt on parts, bolt on parts. But I flew out to California with a buddy of mine, and I watched the professional elite like drivers from Japan, the D1 Grand Prix, and their cars. This was, before that, I had no real connection to racing, at a professional level. But to see those cars and what they were doing and how they were prepared, I knew if I wanted to get involved with the sport, I had to step up in a different way. Whether it was a roll cage, seam sealing the chassis to make it stiffer, doing all these tricks to make the chassis lighter. So when I went back home and I was looking at my car, I picked up an 89 240 SX, and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be able to pay somebody to put a 10-point cage in this thing. Do a full turbo kit because I'm not going to buy a Gretty one. Back then, like pretty much all you could get for turbo systems was off the shelf from Japan. So all the parts were marked up like crazy. So I was like, I had an intercooler, a bunch of pipes for a roll cage, and an SR20, and that was it. I mean, my buddy that I was partners with at the time when we were organizing all the drift events in Florida, I was till 2, 3 in the morning working on my drift car, trying to get it to run, get it up to spec. And that was it. Like, it was cutting, welding, fabrication. Like, that was my first real experience with welding and getting involved with that side of it.
That's crazy, man. So you're actually self-taught then? You never really had any
No,
formal training?
I never went to school. No.
That's amazing, dude. So did you find like a used setup and just bring it to your garage and kind of just trial and error until you found out what worked? Or talk a little bit about how you dove in. Was it feet first?
Well, sort of. So my buddy had a 5 Series, Turbo 5 Series, and he did all the fab work himself. And if there was anyone that taught me how to weld and got me involved with welding, it'd be him. He was a really cool dude from Finland, actually.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, he actually grew up with his dad in his dad's fabrication shop doing like, industrial and like commercial stuff. So he knew how to weld, but like he wasn't the greatest fabricator in the world, but he knew enough, and he was the one that kind of started it. So believe it or not, we actually got another like IROC Z Camaro with a blown motor, and we fixed it up and we rebuilt it and then sold it, and then bought ourselves a Miller. I think it was a 300 DX, like the old dinosaur welder. It's like this tall when you're standing next to it, and it's like this stinking giant behemoth. And it was just a matter of just picking up the torch and sticking metal together and seeing what it would do.
That's amazing, man. Really, because it was kind of just like all the stars were aligned for you. You needed to do the work yourself. You couldn't afford to buy the JDM off the shelf stuff because of the mega tax on it, the markup.
Yeah.
And buddy already had some knowledge and skill and kind of just turned you loose, and that was history, huh?
Yeah, it was probably from 2000 to 2006, 2007 was wrenching and welding on my own race car and other people's drift cars, mainly just drifting. And then from 2007 I sold my drift car because I just got burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say from there on, I started just welding and fabricating as like kind of a job. I found myself working in different shops and welding and kind of just taking what I've learned and just kind of honing it a little bit more. But yeah, it started with me trying to fulfill my passion and then just turned into a full-time job. I'd say from 2011, I got my first like real welding gig. And that was manufacturing exhaust systems and turbo systems for a German tuning shop here in Florida.
Very cool, man.
And I would say I was a good welder, but after that I was a lot better. I was way better, just burning stainless all day.
So that's awesome. I mean, you guys hear this out there, right? In case you have any interest in fabricating, you heard how Tim got into it. It wasn't that he spent tens of thousands of dollars at a technical school. It was just sort of by necessity that he started out, trial and error. He was in the garage, he was making mistakes, he was learning from every mistake that he made. And eventually it went from working on his own cars and buddies' cars to turning into a very lucrative professional career. So don't think that you need to just always sign up for UTI or YOTech or whatever else. Not knocking those places. I'm sure there's value there, but you can't do it on your own with enough determination, patience, and practice.
Yeah, and I'd have to say you have to be prepared to suck. You're not gonna, like I've said this before on my podcast with my buddy JT. You go on Instagram or you go on Facebook and you see all these dime stacking profiles. These guys that are doing these amazing things. It took years and years of basically sucking to get to that point. So don't be afraid to pick up a torch and then dip the tungsten right in the puddle when you're welding and be like, oh man, like it's gonna happen a lot. Like you're gonna make mistakes. And for me, I always picked jobs and I always try to gravitate towards places, not necessarily for how much money I could make, but I always picked jobs and places for the experience. What can I learn? And with the German tuning place, that was a no-brainer because I was able to work on sub $100,000 cars and burn as much aircraft stainless as I want. So I went from welding black, nasty welds on my first set of headers I built to being able to figure out where the settings need to be, what cup size I need to have, and what tungsten I should be using in order to get beautiful gold welds. And that's not to say I've mastered the craft. Like I've been doing this since 2008, 2009. I learn every day, something new. I mean, I'm not the greatest at aluminum. That's like my next big hurdle. I want to like really get that down. But honestly, in the past year or two, I've been doing a lot of titanium. That seems to be like the new material now. So I've been really focused on trying to get that art form down. And that's the greatest thing about welding. It is an art form, and there's a million different materials and a million different ways to do this. And it's never a dull moment. So that's what's fun about it.
For sure, man. I think what you said is really, really important, not just for aspiring fabricators, but pretty much anyone in life, man. And that's just do it. Stop talking, stop thinking, stop psyching yourself out, saying that you're not going to be good enough or you can't, or people are going to dog you and say that what you're doing is shitty. None of that matters, man. Just like you heard Tim say, pick up the welder, start welding. It's going to be full of slag, whatever. It's going to have inconsistencies. You're not going to have nice snail trails and rainbow stacks of dimes. That comes with time. Just the same thing with driving. You ask anybody, pro drifters, grip drivers, whatever, there is literally no replacement for seat time. And I think that's exactly what Tim's getting at with fabricating.
Yeah, I have a lot of guys that message me on social about, what welder I should buy or, what do I do? How do I get into this? And I say the same thing to everyone. Just, it doesn't matter. As long as the welder welds metal, as long as it does what it's supposed to do and you don't buy a complete piece of junk, then it just matters on experience. It just takes time to learn how to hold the torch properly, when to add metal, and watch as many videos as you can. I mean, YouTube University, in my opinion, is the greatest thing on the face of the planet. It's free. I mean, it doesn't cost anything. So to go to a technical school and pay all this money for a career that you might do or might not do, money best well spent just on a good welder and watch as many videos as you can. And if you know someone who welds, just stick to them like glue.
That's it, guys. Take notes. You can do it too. Don't be intimidated. Yes, for sure. There is a reason that fabricators charge the money they do, because it takes a lot of time and a lot of practice to be good at it. You heard Tim. Didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a light switch. But that's not to say that you can't try it also. And just like anything else, you put in the time and you can develop some kind of decent competency with it.
Yeah, I worked for free for a long time before I could actually look someone dead in the eye and say, okay, this is going to cost you X amount of dollars. It's
That's
just
funny
the
that you
nature of
say that, man, because that brings me to my next question. Do you remember the actual first part that you made that you ever sold and got money for?
um, ugh. Yeah, I do actually. It was it was a mid-mounted intercooler setup for an SR20 on a 240. I welded up the intercooler pipes, but I would say I didn't start actually producing sound quality products that were being used on people's cars until I got that job at that German tuning shop. Because that was my job description, you know, like I was building the catalog and I was learning every day how to keep these things together and the integrity of the parts.
So what were you doing mostly then at that German shop? I imagine probably a lot of exhausts, right? The German crowds.
Yeah, all exhaust systems. I was doing when I first got hired there. Um, it was all naturally aspirated and supercharged applications. So we were doing a lot of shorty headers and long tube headers. And then probably a year into working there, everything went turbo overnight. So so it went from long tube headers, which take me like a week to make, to a set of down tubes and cat deletes that would take me a couple of days. So I learned how to build headers really fast and really efficiently there. And I've taken that knowledge with me to what I do now.
Amazing, man. Really? So you cut your teeth in the shop, and then just like you said, sometimes you take on gigs for the experience alone and not even so much the pay. And everything you learn and everything you take away, that's gotten you to where you are at now, right? So you can't
Yeah.
beat it. Yeah. Now let me ask you this, man. Do you ever get to the point where you say, because you are a fabricator full time, that you hate cars just temporarily? I know it's never going to be true that you hate cars indefinitely, but because I know there's a lot of people that have super unrealistic expectations about how long it takes to make something and also about the cost too. And for me, I'm not a fabricator. I wouldn't even know how to turn the welding machine on, but I get super frustrated when people just assume. And I think this is part of too, kind of the plague, if you will, and the double-edged sword of cheap junk parts on eBay. And that
Mm-hmm.
people think they can just buy like a giant 2JZ single turbo manifold. And then when they come to you and they ask you and they're like, hey, Tim, oh, I can get this on eBay for $79.99. How much do you charge and how long is it going to take? And they're floored by the answer. And in my head, I'm kind of like, well, what's wrong with you? This is what this guy does for a living. He doesn't just press a button and it comes out of a box. He needs to sit down and actually design it, cut it, weld it, go back over it, level off the flange. I mean, there's a lot of work involved in it.
Yeah. That conversation's been had so many times that it makes my head spin. And actually, I did get burnt out on the automotive industry a couple of years ago, and I actually took a position at an aerospace company welding airfoils. So, in one sense, it was kind of like, you know, it was a double-edged sword, I guess. It was like, wow, I taught myself how to weld, and I've mirrored guys to the point where I can now weld aerospace parts. So it's kind of like a pat on my back for myself, but at the same time, I wasn't doing what I was passionate about. And that's what kind of is tough about the performance industry is a lot of people don't want to pay to have the quality that they're expecting because of, like you said, because of the Chinese parts, because of the overseas parts that look the same and feel the same, but don't even come close to performing the same.
Yeah.
And when most fabricators and most welders, the customer's talking to you face to face and they're not looking at a Blitz, or an HKS header that's got years of legacy behind it, and it's got a brand that's attached to it. They're just talking to Tim, and they're saying, well, Tim is, this, that, and the other thing. Why should I pay him X amount of dollars for this manifold? It's almost like this weird psychology that people get where they talking to the person that's actually doing the physical work. And I've noticed that if you have a mediator between you and the customer, all of a sudden they're okay with paying prices that it's worth it. But if they're talking to you directly, then all of a sudden we want to start cutting corners and start shortchanging. So I think what I've found out and what I've learned over the years is that you might want to build performance parts for a specific application, but if the customer base just isn't willing to pay for it, then you have to find another platform that will, not gonna, and that's kind of where my career has brought me. I've gone from, I would love to build JDM cars all day, but that customer base, they don't pay. So I've, in the past couple of years, if you go on my Instagram, it's all domestic, resto mod, really high-end hot rods, I guess you could say, which isn't really my cup of tea, but those customers pay. So I can either force my clients or I could force the industry to kind of pay what I want on the applications that I want. Like if I wanted to build manifolds for 240SXs for $4,000, no one's going to buy that. But if I build manifolds for a Ferrari, those guys are going to pay for it. So, you know, my mentality is, you know, am I doing this for completely for passion, or am I doing this because I need to pay my bills? And it's 50-50, but you know, the older I get, the more I'm like, you know, where's the money?
Well, listen, man, and there's nothing wrong with that either, because the fact is that, just like you said, and like we've been talking about, cheap parts, generally speaking, are not good parts. And the saying, you get what you pay for, particularly holds true in the automotive world. And
Yeah.
it's not fair or right to go to somebody that does fabrication for a living, who's put in all the time, the hours, the seared retinas, the burns, everything you can imagine that comes with being a professional fabricator, and expecting or saying, okay, well, I can get this turbo kit from, you know, brand X for $1,200 for the full kit. I mean, okay, great, you can. It's probably going to last you a month before it blows up and you lose your engine. But the fact remains, you got to pay for people's time and expertise. It's not free. You know, they're not doing this just to put a smile on your face so you can brag on Instagram about, oh, yeah, I have a single turbo, whatever. I mean, Tim's got to pay his bills, and what he does doesn't come free. It's really that simple.
Yeah, the best saying I've ever heard was, you know, if a customer is like, well, it only took you 10 minutes, why does it cost you that much? And it's like, well, it took me 10 years to learn how to do that in 10 minutes. So you're not paying for the 10 minutes, you're paying for the 10 years it took me to learn how to do that. Because, you know, when you look at anyone who's a professional, either an athlete or a driver or a craftsman, they're going to make anything look easy. I mean, you know, I've watched in the past hours and hours of in-car footage of drivers from Japan when I was learning how to drift, and they make it look so simple. Like their hand movements were so slow, and it was like, why aren't they like flustering around in the car like crazy? And then you go to an event and you're flustering around like crazy, and you start learning, oh, they're doing this. You know, it's just seat time. It's years of seat time, whatever your trade is, which makes you fast, efficient, and really good at what you do. And some people get it, like you obviously get that, but it's unfortunate when other people don't.
Well, let me ask you, man, that being said, what would you say is the percentage of, I know you sort of gotten to be very specific and you choose your client base now, but what would you say the percentage is of people that have come to you that actually understand and respect the time and the years that you've put in versus the jabronis that are like, oh, well, I can't understand why you're asking for this much money. Forget it. I'll just buy it online.
Yeah, I would say probably 5%. Maybe even less.
Oh, which is must be hair pulling frustrating for you, man, because you have put in so much time and effort into this.
Well, I feel like the spectrum is so crazy as far as like the 95% that are just looking at the dollar sign and the 5% that are looking for someone who will do it right and they don't care how much it costs and they expect it to be expensive. That's why it will be done right. When you find your 5% of clients, they're the best clients you'll ever have. And it makes the work so much more enjoyable. Whereas if you're just going after that 95% with, you know, Billy with the 240SX and he's got his entire paycheck into that car, or, you know, the Mustang crowd or the BMW guys or whatever it is. I mean, for the most part, 95% of people out there, they're just looking at eBay, and then you got that 5%, like you're saying, that are willing to pay. They're looking for somebody that can do what they say they're going to do, and they're totally on board with it.
Well, then that's a perfect transition, man. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're at now and what you're doing? Because I think that speaks to that 5%.
Yeah. So, like I said before, like the last year or two, it's been resto mods, and I've been working with some really good guys. Like right now, I'm a subcontractor for a couple different shops. I've had the privilege of working with some big names in the industry that, in their own right, I think have done some pretty cool things. John Cossey, for one, he built some really amazing big block V8s with these dual cam giant heads on them and all aluminum. I've worked with Tom Nelson with a couple projects as far as getting stuff set up for him over here in Florida so he can, finish up in California. And right now I'm down in Boca working at a shop called Salvage to Savage, S2S Speed Shop. And it's a really cool, motivated group of guys that right now they've kind of put all their laser focus into this truck, this C10 pickup that we've been building. And that's got actual Tom Nelson turbos on it, Holley Performance intake, fully built motor, Haltech ECU, and it's actually got a Hoonigan handbrake in it, drift handbrake. So it's kind of like a mashup of everything. And from when this virus started to now, that's pretty much all I've been doing is working on that truck. But within the same vein of what we were saying before, I got to rewind maybe 3 years ago, where I met a guy by the name of Jeremy Miranda. And he owns a shop called Miranda Built in Pompano Beach. And my hat's off to him because, he gave me a call one day and wanted me to do a turbo system for a 47 Ford Vicky, actually, like the station wagon looking thing.
Yeah.
And I never touched a domestic, before that. It was all Japanese cars and drift cars and this, that, and the other. And he let me do this turbo system that was pretty wild. The turbos actually hung out of the front fenders, and they were like in the position where the headlights are, if you can kind of picture that.
Very cool.
So I did the headers, I did the down pipes, I did the up pipes, because the turbos were like up top, all the intercooler system. And I used those pictures and used that to market myself to get more of that work. And it's been probably 4 or 5 projects since then. And now I'm at Salvage to Savage right now. And I got a couple other clients down south in Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. But yeah, it's been interesting.
That's awesome, man. So, and kind of super interesting too, in that, like you said, it might not necessarily be your chosen cup of tea, that you order at Starbucks, but I can see that you've added your own bit of influence to it. JDM lifestyle, right? You've got the handbrake in it, the hydro handbrake.
Yeah.
Obviously, putting giant turbos and running a lot of boost is probably not something that most guys building hot rods and rat rods would do. So I feel like you've probably had a lot of input and influence in sort of pointing the needle of the compass in that direction.
Yeah. A really big project that I did that was very JDM influenced was I did 4 turbos on a Suburban, on an old 57 Suburban.
I remember that.
And the customer just wanted something wild, so I talked him into doing 4 turbos. So we did 4 small housing Garretts, and then I went to Tycon and got all titanium for the whole system. It was all pie cuts. There had to have been 400 pie cuts on this kit. 4 different downpipes with 2 merges to a 4-inch exhaust. And then it had 4 different charge pipes going into 2 giant Vibrant intercoolers that were they were massive. And all HD clamps from Vibrant. And it was just immense. It was insane. But the whole system, the whole time I was building it, I was actually envisioning the old school teen R34 with the twin turbo system. That was just, I remember seeing it when I was a kid in Super Street. It was like a million pipes, like everywhere. And I wanted that look. Like I wanted you to pop the hood and it looked like a paper mill under there, like a million different pipes just going everywhere, and you're just gonna get lost with it. So it's all external wastegates and everything. And it was a lot of fun to build that.
That's awesome, man. And it's a very cool build. I will put up all your social pages and links at the end so people can find you and check out all the work that you've done. It's worth the time. It really is, guys. I go and see
Appreciate it, man.
Oh, it's wild stuff. If you are a car guy in any way, shape, or form, you will be able to appreciate what Tim does. Now, that being said, man, and this is when I told you we were going to revisit the poster in your background. If you have tabula rasa, blank slate to build pretty much whatever it is that you can envision in your brain, what's it going to be? I have a feeling I already know, but let's hear it.
I love these conversations. Believe it or not, it's not a DeLorean.
Oh, see, I was wrong.
Yeah. I've been thinking about for a while now to do a resto mod Ferrari or Lamborghini. Oh. So like my dream build would be a Lamborghini Countach, old school 80s, and I want to stuff a modern brand new Aventador drivetrain into it.
Man, I love the sound of that already. And being that it's your vision and your dream, I imagine there's probably at least one turbo involved, probably two, and lots of titanium.
Yeah, it's twin turbo. Yeah, twin turbo.
Of course, naturally.
Twin turbo.
Yeah.
Twin turbo, Aventador powered Countach. I think that'd be pretty sick.
All right, guys. You heard that, right? So if anybody's in search of a really badass SEMA car, Tim's already got the idea. And he can actually make it. That's the difference.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I remember having that conversation probably a million times before I had my driver's license. I think anyone that was addicted to cars, they always just sat around and talked about what would you buy and how would you build it.
That's it, man. Of course, right? That's kind of a requirement for being a car guy, is it not?
Yeah, yeah.
For sure, man. Well, I might have thought that it would have been a DeLorean with a 2J swap. I know that already exists in Florida somewhere. I think someone cobbled one together, but I'm talking about a Tim spec one. But I would not be mad at the Countach either.
Yeah, I am talking to a customer right now to do a LS twin turbo DeLorean, so we'll see if that comes to fruition.
All right. Did you guys need any more reason to follow Tim on social media? I mean, if you didn't already think he was a rad dude and enjoyed what he was telling us about, now you're hearing some of the inklings of what's to come. So I'll put up the links. You find Tim, smash that follow button so you can see what comes of all this.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. Anything else you want to leave us off with? Anything else you want to talk about? How you doing down there? Everything's cool in this time? You guys are healthy, safe?
Yeah, they opened everything up on Monday. And but, you know, I think I'm going to proceed a little more cautiously, but at the same time, it's everything seems to be good. They opened the beaches back up and everything like that, so everything should be copacetic. No drift events yet, so my car is still sitting collecting dust. But up in Orlando, they've actually had like several events already.
Oh, cool.
Just in South Florida, they're all locked up still.
Well, so you guys heard it. Tim's getting his weld on. He's starting to get his fix by being able to go to a few events. He still can't get sideways quite yet, but that's coming soon. So I will say thank you guys, as always, very much for tuning in. Thank you, Tim, for your time, brother, and your talent and your expertise. Very glad that you were willing to sit down and share with us. And
thanks for having me.
See you guys again soon. Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Big thanks to Tim for joining us and sharing all his knowledge and expertise. Appreciate it, Tim. Remember, I'm going to roll his social right after this. You guys can find him, follow him, check out what he's up to. And as always, if you like what you see, smash that like button, smash that follow button, and we'll see you guys next time.
Sounds like squirrels are being pushed into the engine. That's what this is. It's a squirrel mincer.